Hello everybody and welcome to Roll-A-Niche. My name is Matt and in today's video we are going to cover all of the basics of the Druid class and what all Druids can do. In a future video we're going to cover the Druidic circles, which is a feature you can get at one of your levels and it determines your subclass. But for now we're going to stick to learning about our Druids. Now, Druids are people that are so in tune with nature that they are using elemental forces or nature itself to power their abilities. This could include, somebody using, elemental forces of air, water, fire, and earth, or perhaps using the storms around them, the terrain around them to help fuel their spell casting because they are protectors of nature. Some of the Druids are, and this is a way that you can play it, are so protective of nature that they hate unnatural creatures, such as aberrations, things like beholders or mind flayers, or even undead, like zombies, skeletons, vampires. They are protecting the forces of nature from those unnatural creatures. So there's another way that you could play it where if you want your druid to have a specific faith, you could say that your druid is utilizing divine power to fuel their spells, but utilizing a god that is either pro-nature or unnatural, if you want to put a twist on things. So there's a way that you could do that and incorporate deities into your character build should you choose to do that, but you don't have to. So creating a druid is a lot of fun because it allows you to do a little bit of everything. I like to think at the druid as like the Swiss Army knife of the classes. They can do some martial damage. They can wear some armor. They can do some spell casting. And they can do some abilities that are going to be unique to them that make them very different than, say, a cleric of the nature domain. If you are going to build a druid, my recommendation to you is to put your focus in wisdom, because it is the wisdom ability that is going to drive your spell casting. So things like your spell attack damage modifier or your spell save DC, difficulty class, is going to be based on how high your wisdom modifier is. So whereas your druid might not need strength so much as they do wisdom. So maybe when you're building your character and rolling or assigning your array of points to your ability modifier, focus your attention on wisdom. That would be my recommendation. But you do what you want. Second, maybe consider putting your next highest ability score into something like dexterity to make you nimble and quick and somebody that can move around a battlefield quickly, or maybe even constitution to make sure that you have a sufficient amount of health as comparable to somebody like a rogue or a lower fighting class, because you do have the ability to do some melee damage. And that's what the player's handbook is recommending here. Wisdom should be your highest ability score, followed by constitution, because you do have the option to do melee damage, and that would allow you or force you into close combat. So maybe you focus there. And then, of course, a background, it recommends Hermit. Not to get too much into detail with the background, but Hermits are going to add, it's going to allow you to utilize a background of like, hey, I grew up in the wild, right? Or I spend all my time in the natures and outdoors. That's why I'm so attuned, and help explain your druidic backstory. The Hermit background is also going to give you a couple extra skill proficiencies, a new language, and things like that. So it's something to consider when you're building your character. What we're looking at next is the Druidic table that is found in your player's handbook. And here it's going to show you what the proficiency bonus is going to be per level. And you can see it increases at level 5. what features you're going to get as you level up, how many cantrips you know, how many spell slots are available to you at each level. And you can see every time you increase in level in Druid, you're going to get more spell slots available to you, which just means more spells you'll be able to cast before you need to rest to replenish your energy. And so as you look throughout this table, you could see that it continues to grow. If I scroll to the side, you could see that your Druid could get access to 9th level spells, the highest a spell could be, right at that 17th level mark. So when you're building your Druid, if you want to get to the highest possible level of spell you can cast, 17 is that benchmark for you. And of course, anything beyond that, you might be getting a little bit more spell slots, especially here at level 20. When you reach Arch Druid, you get that you get more spell slots, especially that 7th level spell at level 20. So these are some of the things that you can count on. So let's take a look into each one and figure out what, talk about what these things are. When it comes to hit dice, your Druid is going to utilize a D8. That's that diamond-shaped dice that I hold in my hand, an 8-sided die. So anytime you're leveling up, this is what you would roll to see what your hit point increase would be, or anytime you're taking a short rest and you want to regain hit points, it's the D8 that you would focus on using to regain your spell slots. When it comes to proficiencies, things that you're good at or things that you can use, armor. Druids can use light armor, medium armor, and shields. It is a specific footnote in your player's handbook that Druids will not wear armor or use shields made of metal. This is something that Druids naturally built into the game have made a decision for you to be like, hey, if you're going to use a Druid and they're all things nature, why are you using metal, right? When there's wood available, which is something you can lean into. You can ignore that if you want to, but it's there for you to utilize as a possible footnote or a challenge for you to consider when building your character. When it comes to weapons, your Druid is able to use clubs, daggers, darts, javelins, maces, quarterstaffs, scimitars, sickles, slings, and spears. That's it. Anything outside of that weapon, your Druid will not be able to use unless you take some kind of feat which will allow you more weapon options. You might want to consider those when you approach the option to take an ability score improvement or a feat at levels 4, 8, 12, 16, and 19. So just something to consider when you build your character, to look ahead at what you're getting at certain level points so you know what to prepare for in your build. As far as tools go, your Druid has access to an herbalism kit. Now, this might present itself in roleplay like you collecting components that might go into a potion or something like that you could then work with somebody with alchemy skills to make that potion. Or maybe you're using your herbalism kit to create ingredients for a special food or something like that. Role play option there for you. When it comes to proficiency and saving throws, intelligence and wisdom are the two that you're going to automatically have proficiency in, so they're going to roll a little bit higher, or your bonus will be a little bit higher than the other saving throws, because naturally you'd be good at that. Druids are considered smart and wise classes, or a class. And then from skills, you get to choose 2 of the following options. Arcana, where your magic comes from. Animal handling, how you relate to and communicate with animals. Insight. Insight's going to be something like, can I tell that their person's being truthful, right? Medicine, like your ability to try and stabilize somebody if they're down. Nature speaks for itself. Would you recognize species, plants, and things like that? Perception, what do I see? What do I hear? What do I smell? Religion, and of course, survival, your ability to track things. So you get to pick 2 from that list, and all of those are pretty appropriate for a Druid, so it makes it kind of hard that you only get 2. But hey, that's the challenge of Druid. When it comes to equipment, notice that they specified wooden shield or any simple weapon. Here's a good way to think about this is that if you can't really wear metal armor, the armor that you can wear is going to be limited to like leathers and hides, which are on the lower end of the armor class scale. So being able to take a shield and hold a shield is always going to give you a +2 to your armor class. So it would be wise to don a shield. That would mean you only have one hand free to use for your weapon or to hold your component to cast a spell, or perhaps your arcane focus, like maybe your spell comes from your staff or a wand or an orb that you hold, something like that. So consider that if you are taking a shield, you only get the bonus when you're holding it. So you're only going to have one arm free. So if you've got an idea that using something that requires two hands like a crossbow or longbow, one, you're not proficient in something like that. And if you wanted to take a feat that would allow you to, you would need two hands to use that weapon. So that means you're not going to hold your shield. So something to consider when looking at your equipment, to think carefully. Next, you get to choose a scimitar, like a curved blade, or any simple weapon. Of course, sticking to what you're proficient with. And then lastly, you get to choose leather armor. You get leather armor, a explorer's pack, which contains things like your backpack, your mess kit, torches, and then a druidic focus. And a druidic focus is typically where your spells come from. You might present this as like, here it says a sprig of holly or mistletoe. Perhaps you have that tied to the quarterstaff that you hold. And when you cast your spells, you just aim that quarterstaff at where you're targeting, and your spells project out of that piece of holly or mistletoe. If you want to use something else like a hibiscus flower or something else that is naturally occurring in nature, just talk to your DM and say, hey, for flavor, I'd like to put some pine cones on my quarterstaff, and my spells actually come out of the pine cones. Awesome. Do that. So talk to your DM about stuff like that, but that's really just for flavor. Okay. Druidic is a language that only Druids speak. It's kind of like a secret language. When we get to talking about rogues, rogues have a similar language that only rogues know called Thieves' Cant. It's kind of like a way to write or perhaps whisper something to another Druid that only another Druid would know. So it is a very limited language, but very useful in, trying to have secretive conversations. But you could use it. You could use it to speak and write. Others that might come across or overhear you or see your message that you left behind would have to really pass a decently high 15 perception check to try and decipher it without using magic. So it's a pretty good way to keep your messages coded and safe amongst other druids. Spell casting, we're going to get into. I'm going to try and summarize this the best way that I can. At first level, you immediately know 2 cantrips. Now, cantrips, again, are like 0 level spells. They are base level spells that are easy. They're not too complicated. And it's something that you've mastered and doesn't consume a spell slot or your energy. You could just cast these spells at will. You get 2 of them starting at first level. And at higher levels, you begin to learn more, which you can see here listed out on your Druid spellcasting table in your player's handbook. When it comes to preparing and casting spells, you have access to all the Druid spells at a time for that specific level. So at level 1, you only have so many spell slots to use at first level. So looking back at our table, you only have 2 spell slots. So you can only cast 2 spells. However, you have all the Druid spells at your disposal to pick from. What you need to do, and Druids can do this at the start of every day, is prepare spells. Basically, the amount of spells that you can prepare are going to equal the total of your Wisdom modifier plus your Druid level. So let's say you have a Wisdom score of 16. That means your Wisdom modifier is a +3. And if you're a first level Druid, that means you can prepare 4 spells, right? Of those 4 spells at level 1, you can only cast 2 spells. So pick one of the 4 and do it twice, or pick 2 out of these 4 spells. Having options is what is the point of preparing spells. So as that wisdom modifier increases, you can prepare more and have more options. Again, another reason why you want that wisdom ability modifier as high as you can get it for things like that. Give yourself the options. So, if you are going to cast and prepare spells daily, just make sure that at every long rest, part of your role play with your table and your DM, and just be like, hey, when I wake up, the first thing I'm going to do is prepare some spells. And you want to go through and make sure that you highlight on your sheet, or maybe you're using D&D Beyond and swap them out. You can do that. So you're going to have slots. That's how many you can actually cast, how many times you can actually cast. Prepared just means I can prepare these spells, and these are the options in which I have to choose from, but I have to choose judiciously, if that helps better explain spellcasting. Druids can also do something called ritual casting. When you are looking at your spells, and there's a whole list of spells in the back of your player's handbook, and if you're using D&D Beyond, when you click inside the spell, it will tell you which spells require concentration, or it might have a tag that says ritual. Druids can cast ritual spells without expending a spell slot, as long as it has that ritual tag. So if you're looking at a spell and it says ritual, that means you can cast it without using up a spell slot. You just have to abide by the casting time. Some ritual spells are not instantaneous. Some of them take a minute. Some of them take 10 minutes. Some of them take an hour. Some of them are even longer than that. So you need to be thinking of this when you're looking at the potential of casting a ritual spell. Okay, Druidic focus. We talked about that. There's this section here in the Druid class that talks about sacred plants and wood. One of the reasons that they don't like using metal in their armor or their weapons is because they find plants and wood to be sacred. And a druid is a master of elemental or natural arts, and they almost view this as strictly as a believer would to their faith. Perhaps you're playing a druid that follows a faith. Holding plants to be sacred is why they would use certain woods and things like that, because they consider things like elder and ash and birch and hazel and holly. These are sacred to them, and they want to incorporate them in, especially in their use of magic. Just something to know for roleplay's sake. One of the things that all druids get at 2nd level is the ability to wild shape. Now, this means that you can turn into a beast. And how that works is that when you get wild shape at 2nd level, you could choose a creature that has a maximum challenge rating, CR, of 1/4. So if you're a player that has their hands on a monster manual, you can look at the challenge rating of each creature in that book. If the creature has a challenge rating of 1/4 or less, you can turn into that creature as a druid, so long as it does not have a flying or a swimming speed. For example, a wolf, you could see the challenge rating right in the middle there is 1/4. So when you turn into said creature, you use that creature's stat block. So if I click on wolf, and let's say our druid turned into a wolf, that means my armor class is now 13, and my hit points are now 11. I have a speed of 40 feet. I have a +4 to my stealth and a +3 to my perception. I've got keen hearing and smell. I have pack tactics, which means I have advantage on attacks if I have an ally within 5 feet of my target. And my only real action I can do is bite. So you are a wolf. until you either dismiss your wild shape or you drop to 0 hit points. So let's say I'm this mean, angry orc and I swing my weapon at you and I hit you for 12 damage. You only have 11 hit points. So not only do you lose the 11 hit points, but there's one left over. What happens is you revert back to your druid shape, your natural form, and that natural form loses 1 hit point. We don't take that 11 out of your character's hit points. We take that 11 out of the wolf. And when the wolf becomes 0, any leftover damage now comes from your character. Does that make sense? So if you had 11 hit points as a wolf and you took 12 damage, that means your druid player character only loses a hit point, but you're no longer a wolf. Okay? Now, this begins to increase as you level up. When you reach 4th level, you could turn into a creature that has a maximum challenge rating of a half, but you're not allowed a flying speed. If you find yourself something like a crocodile, you can now swim. You couldn't swim before. Now you can. You just can't fly. So now you turn into this crocodile. Your AC is 12. Your hit points are 19. You can walk 20 feet and swim 30. You can hold your breath for 15 minutes. So if you need to swim into that bottom of that lake to find something, your crocodile could do just that. Could hold their breath for 15 minutes and search. And then, of course, you get this bite action. Again, if you take an excess of 19 hit points, you will drop to your character's natural form, and if there's any leftover damage, your player character takes that. When you reach 8th level, the maximum credit challenge rating of a creature you can turn into is a challenge rating of 1. And now you get no limitations. So you can swim, you can climb, you can fly, as long as you're not exceeding a challenge rating of 1. So can you turn into a dragon? No. There are no dragons with 1 challenge rating. Can you turn into an owlbear like you saw in the movie Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves? No. Because an owlbear's challenge rating is, I believe, like 5 or something like that. But you could turn into something like a giant eagle. Giant eagles have an armor class of 13. They have 26 hit points. They can walk 10 feet or fly 80. They've got keen sight, which is advantage on perception, and they get multi-attack. You can make an attack with your beak and then make an attack with your talon. And then you can carry some weight because, you know, a giant eagle is going to be very strong and should be able to carry a decent amount of weight with a strength of 16. So that's going to be up to your DM on how much weight you can carry, but if I can grab you by the shoulders and fly my 40-pound halfling friend somewhere, I might just do that. So that's an example of what wild shape is. And you get access to that at 2nd level, and it grows as you grow your druid. There's a little bit more information that is in here, but I summarized it for you. You can't cast spells while in your druidic form earlier on in your druidic career, we'll call it, but more on that to come. Also at 2nd level, you get to choose your subclass, and your subclass is called a druidic circle. This video is going to cover the basics and what all druids get. Our next video is going to cover the 2 druidic circle options that are available in your player's handbook, and they are the Circle of the Land and the Circle of the Moon. These are your subclass options, and each one has unique abilities based on what you've chosen at 2nd level, and we'll get into those at another video. At 4th level, and again at 8th, 12th, 16th, and 19th level, you have the ability to either increase 1 ability score by 2 points or 2 ability scores by 1 point. If your dungeon master allows it, this is where you could say, I'm not going to take an ability score. Instead, I'm going to take a feat. And a feat is like a series of special moves or special things that your character can do, and each one's a little bit different. So maybe if you want to do something where your druid has more weapon options, there are feats like Martial Adept or weapon master that can, give you more weapon options if you want to have your druid be more versatile with their weapon uses. There are feats like spell sniper or warcaster that will give you different abilities as far as your spell casting is concerned. There's things like tough, where tough adds 2 hit points per level every time you level up and you roll for your hit points and you add your constitution modifier. If you have the tough feat, you get an extra 2 every time. And this is a good way to really beef up your health stats and make you more formidable. So consider that. At 18th level, you get a feature called Timeless Body. And that means the primal magic that you wield causes you to age more slowly. For every 10 years that pass, your body only ages 1 year. So if you think about something, a race that already lives long, and if you want more info on races, we have a video on our YouTube called Races Explained. Check it out. But if you choose a race that naturally lives a long time, like an elf or a dwarf, being a druid with a timeless body feature could have you living literally several centuries. So that is a good way to role play and slow down your aging and be like, oh man, I'm only 113. I'm still young. It's a good way to consider in your role plays. At 18th level, you get beast spells. So you can cast many of your druidic spells in the shape that you assume as a wild shape. So when you're in wild shape form early on in your career, as I mentioned, you can't cast spells when you're in animal form. You got to revert back to your druid to do so. But at 18th level, you're going to be able to cast some of those spells as an animal. Anything with you could perform the somatic and verbal components of a druid spell while in beast shape, but you aren't able to provide material components. Now, it all depends on your campaign. Like, if your DM is running a campaign where you use components to cast your spells, that's going to matter. If you're not utilizing and collecting components, but you're just going to say, hey, I use my arcane focus, or in your case, your druidic focus, and that's where your spells come from, then that's not even going to matter to you. Your spells will be available to you, all of them, because you're ignoring the material component anyway when you're using an arcane or druidic focus. So you'd be more suited to a campaign that uses arcane or druidic focuses in lieu of material components, because then you can use all your spells. The way I look at it, at Archdruid, at 20th level, you become an Archdruid. You have an unlimited amount of wild shapes available to you. At lower levels, you're limited to how many times you could wild shape. And that tends to grow a little bit as you level up too. But when you get to 20th level, you're considered an Archdruid. You have no limit on how many times you can wild shape. And you've got that timeless body. So this is kind of like saying, like, you're pretty much almost immortal at this point. And that's a way to look at it. We're going to stop this video there because the next section of your player's handbook dives into the druidic circles. So be sure to come back right here for our next video where we break down the druidic circle of the land and circle of the moon subclasses. And until next time, keep rolling those dice and we'll see you at the table.